Hey guys, welcome back to another Content Capitalist Podcast recap. And this is a conversation I had with Taki Moore. He is a good friend of mine and my mentor when it comes to coach marketing tactics. Now, a lot of people know him as the Barefoot Millionaire Coach. I know him as Taki. Great guy. Now, here's the thing. Before he got to making his millions and tens of millions of dollars through online coaching, here is where he started. He started where he actually couldn't afford to pay the groceries. And when that happens, you know you've hit rock bottom, because what are groceries? Like at the most $30, $40, maybe $100, right? If you're really going all out. And if you can't afford that and you have a wife and kids to support, then that's when you realize either one of two things. Number one, I'm fucked, or number two, there's no way to go but up. And that's exactly what happened. We're gonna dive into his story, his background, and also, most importantly, what he's doing right now with content that's working to attract the right prospects that turn to clients and make him his tens of millions of dollars. Let's jump into it.
The Content Capitalist Podcast.
You actually had to borrow money for groceries from a friend.
So talking to my friend Sam, who was much better off than me financially and much better with his money. And I told him that I just didn't have, I didn't know how I was going to pay rent. And he lent me $200 to go to the supermarket and get groceries, which was embarrassing, but I'm really grateful because thankfully I only had to do that once. So I got the groceries, and then a couple of days later I come home from work, and Kiri Marie, my wife's there, and she says, "Hey babe, I've got some news." And my brain just goes, "Oh, I like news." She goes, "You might want to sit down." And my brain went, "Oh, I don't like sit down news. Sit down news is never like good news." And she says, "Hun, I'm pregnant." We were already dying financially, and now we've got one more mouth to feed. And that put me on this clock, which was like, if we can get to $8,000 a month by the time this baby's born, I think we'll be okay. And if I can't, I think we're fucked. And
what was the gap then between, where you were at $8,000?
About $6,000.
Okay. So you wanted to pretty much
right? Something like that. I knew that if
you wanted to quadruple your income.
I don't remember the exact number, but in that, we were a long way away. A friend of mine, Grant, connected me with a guy who had an audience of business marketing consultants that he used to get on a conference call every Tuesday with and kind of yell at them to follow the system and do the work. And and he didn't enjoy it and they didn't enjoy it. And so he asked me to run a session. It was like my first ever, it wasn't a webinar, it was a teleseminar. It was funny because I'd never done one before. He's like, "Let's just do an interview." I'm like, "Okay, well," he goes, "Can you send me some questions?" Okay. So I was trying to figure out what questions can I get this guy to ask me that would show that I could really help. And so I just figured out, I think it was my 7 best client results ever, and then reverse engineered a question that would let me kind of tell that story as if I was just coming up with the story. Blah, blah, blah. So that's kind of what we did. And at the end, I was too scared to make an offer because I was terrified of sales and asking for money. And so at the end, he goes like, "Taki, that was fantastic." After everyone got off, "Taki, that was fantastic, but you forgot to sell something." I was like, "Oh," I was a bit nervous. He's like, "Can you write an email that I'll send?" So I wrote this email basically saying, Taki shared everything except for the fact that his wife is heavily pregnant. Doctors say baby could come, anytime now. And so on Friday, he's closing his doors to new business and just going to work with existing clients. So you got till Friday, here's kind of how it works. Send him an email. People emailed me and I was shocked. I didn't know how to get, take money on the internet. So the next day I'm ringing the 46 people. It's like, "Hey Ken, it's Taki here. I got an email saying that you wanted to join the thing. Is that right?" And they're like, "Yep." I'm like, "Oh, of course you do. So here's how it works. Do you remember?" And they're like, "Yep. So let me get you entered into the system." And then I just grab a pen and paper and I'd write their name and their phone number and their address down. And then that night I was up Googling how to process money on the internet, and away we went. It was good.
Chase Jarvis said something really cool. He said, "The best camera is the one you have with you." And that answers things so well. Here's the thing. So many people want to get it just right. They want the fancy studio, the fancy lights, the fancy cameras. Here's Taki's advice on getting started, because he was stuck in that exact same loop where he was thinking, "I need the good equipment to create good content, but I need the content to make the money." But there's this vicious cycle, right? There's the money, the equipment, and actually the content itself. So he actually had to break out of this vicious cycle, and he's going to unpack that part of the story right here. When you first started doing video, was there a hurdle there, as far as imposter syndrome, as far as wondering, hey, does my hair look wonky? Does my voice sound weird?
My hurdles were less about hair and voice. I think this is super sexist, but women have a harder time with that stuff, and I think they get judged more. There's a bunch of fat, ugly guys who seem to do okay. I know it's dumb, but I think it's probably true. Mine was like, my procrastination was about the gear and then not having like needed the format. So let's talk about gear first and then format. There's a dumb part of all of our brain, which is if I had the right stuff, then I'd be able to shoot the right videos. And I'm just like one camera away from being really good at this stuff. And it's not true, but I believed it. And so I was watching this YouTuber called Casey Neistat, who I love, and he's shooting on a Canon 70D. And he's talking about how great it is. So I bought the Canon 70D. I think I bought the 80D because it was, it had just replaced it or whatever. And then, so I've got the camera and I'm feeling good about it. And then he does this video that like a couple of weeks later saying, oh, I've moved to Sony. Like, crap, I can't be a good camera. So what did I do? I bought the freaking Sony, didn't I? And then literally 3 days later, he's like, oh, I've moved from that Sony to this other Sony. And so I'm 3 cameras in 3 weeks. It's stupid. And my videos didn't get any better. I was just like obsessed about the gear. And then a guy called Michael Gebbin once told me, it's the wizard, not the wand. I was like, okay, so it's clearly not the gear. And I love gear as much as the next guy. I don't have as much cool camera gear as you do. I've got like a couple of cameras. One that sits up here and a couple back home in Sydney. But it's totally not the camera. So I let go of that. I shoot, at least half of my videos on my phone. I mean, this is like an iPhone mini. It's not like the fancy super duper big one. I just love this little phone. And it's great and fine. And sometimes if you think about a spectrum between like professional video and personal video, sometimes the personal stuff just works better. People seem to relate to it better. And it's just easy because it's in your pocket and you just bang it out and away we go. The other thing that I think I got that would have been a stumbling block, but I knew myself, was I'm really good at freestyling when I've got a framework to follow. And so just working out a framework for here's like the structure of my videos. Like what go in a great video? There'd be a hook. There'd be a little bit of like why you need it. There'd be, 1 or 3 big ideas, and then some kind of, call to action piece, loosely, and a wrap up. So like I built this little thing, I called it the video flow, which is like an outliner for an episode. And then if I had to shoot a video, I would either just sketch out, a few keywords for each of those sections, or I just look at the camera, say the first bit, keep staring at the camera, think about my next bit, then look at the camera and do the next bit, and like just jump cut, nothing fancy, but just jump cuts. And then later on with Spark Camera, this app I love on my iPhone, I can just do the same thing, just like hold it, say my bit, think about the next bit, say my bit. So framework was really helpful for me. I didn't really have imposter syndrome because the video is not really about me. It's about who's watching it and me trying to help them. And I think a guy called Matt Church once said, you fix nervous with service. And I found that really helpful. It's like, I'm not relevant. I don't even matter. There's somebody there who needs the stuff, and I'm just going to talk to them.
I just noticed while you're explaining this, and number one, good for you for not having imposter syndrome, getting in front of the camera. But the other thing that I wanted to highlight is that I've seen a lot of people say a lot of profound things, and if I was new, then I'd think that this person's an absolute genius. But because I've been around the block a few times, I'm like, oh, he's quoting so and so and so and so.
Yeah.
You keep referencing the person's name, even a couple people I didn't know. And I'm like, okay, and this is that level of integrity that, and I'd encourage anybody who's listening, if you're making content and you hear something really clever and you use it, credit it, because that's just gonna, like what happens, I feel when people don't do it, they feel insecure, right? They just feel like, I want people to think it's me.
You know it from somewhere else. You're like, oh, this person just took credit for something that's not their idea. Yeah, you just lose credibility. So just say
omission. What do they call it?
Sins of omission.
Through omission or something. Like it's
correct.
It's a slippery slope, And then I think that guy Jay Shetty, he got called out for it big time a couple years ago because he actually started putting his name on the quotes that were not his, or somebody on his team did. That was a mess. So I just wanted to say thanks for doing that.
No worries.
And I try my best to remember. Sometimes I probably.
It's like So that's called attribution, and I think it's a classy thing to do. The best example of it I saw was from a basketball coach called John Wooden, who was the coach of the UCLA Bruins. I think more championships, maybe still, but certainly at the time than anyone by years and years and years of like something like 7 or 8 in a row. I don't know the stats, but loosely. And he kept stats on everything, and he's the guy who invented, in basketball they have the assist. Like if I throw you the ball and you score, you get the points, but I get the assist.
Yeah.
So he invented the assist. And so he said, guys, from now on, if somebody gives you the ball and you score, on the way back down the court when you're hustling into defense, just like acknowledge them or point or whatever, to acknowledge the assist. And one of his guys said, but coach, what if they're not looking? He just said, I guarantee they'll be looking. And I think that's good. It's good advice. Just acknowledge the assist, because we all got, I'm sure you've added your own, your yes ands and your yes buts to it. But a lot of the ideas we have come from somewhere, even if they're just loosely inspired by. So just give credit.
Yeah. And it does the opposite of what most people think. If people think that if they attribute, then people are going to think, oh, you're just a copycat. But once they figure out you didn't attribute it, it's so much worse. There's so much more respect for people who feel secure enough to do that. Yeah.
Either I've got to learn from all these people, or I can chat with you who's learned from all these people, and you're my shortcut. And that's an advantage too.
$1 million. Stop for a moment and think about how that word made you feel, how that number made you feel. And here's what's important. When Taki went through scaling from $0 to $1 million and now tens of millions of dollars, there's different strategies you got to put in place, but the emotion you have to those different numbers are what's going to affect how quickly you go through it. And that's what this next section is about. It's about scaling your coaching business using content, and of course, all the other things like ads and follow-ups and emails and everything else that's important. So watch this next part, especially if you want some perspective on scaling your business past these milestones. Was there a situation or a time where you were doing too many different things and you realized the madness must stop? Tell me about that breaking point.
Yeah, I think the natural tendency is to see the other thing or the next thing as better than the current thing and want to chop and change all the time. And the downside of that is you never build momentum. And so I think a lot of people look for variety outside their current business. And I'm just fascinated by the variety in my current business. I just think there's so many things I'm never going to run out of stuff to do, to tinker, to tweak, to make better. I'm not really looking for outside. We got to well over $1 million before we launched another thing. And then well over another $1 million before we looked at, it was probably maybe 5 million, 3 to 5 mil when we launched the second thing. And I think if you've got more than one business and you're under $1 million a year, part of the reason you're under $1 million a year is because you've got more than one business. And I just think it's easier to be one thing to one person and get really freaking good at it.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed watching the Content Capitalist podcast recap just as much as I enjoyed having the conversation one-on-one with Taki Moore. These are excerpts from a 1 hour long conversation where there's a lot more stuff that we couldn't fit into 10 minutes, but it's all really good. Right around here, you're going to click, you can see the full length episode, or if you want to listen so that you don't have to be watching while you're driving, while you're cleaning, while you're washing dishes, while you're working out, then click down below in the description, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, take your pick, get in there, and I can't wait to see you in the next episode.